Mike Griffith here along with Chip Towers. And Chip, it's been a sort of a busy day for us with the news on Mark Richt. Obviously there's some comments from Jim Chaney and Jake Fromm. We'll get to that in a minute. But I want to start out with the news on Mark Richt. Mark Richt retiring from Miami today, the former Georgia coach that won a couple SEC titles at Georgia, didn't get the national title, but won a lot of football games at Georgia, left the program on some pretty good footing. You knew Coach Richt quite well, covered his entire tenure. I guess I just want to open up and get your thoughts on Mark Richt's decision today.
Well, I mean, I was surprised. I knew there was some heat on him because obviously the athletic director, right after that bowl loss in the Pinstripe Bowl, came out and said that it was unacceptable and they needed, quote unquote, significant improvement. That's something you never want to hear your AD say. And then, what happened in the days since? I've exchanged some text with Mark. He doesn't want to comment on anything right now beyond what he has. But I think the good news for him is that he went out on his own terms. And as I wrote at Dog Nation, you can go read about it now on the Towers Take. I just hope Georgia fans appreciate what he did for the Georgia program. There's no question that he built it to a level where you could hand it off to Kirby Smart with the hopes of him taking it to another level. And I also point this out. Nobody's more excited than me about what Kirby Smart has done for the program and where he appears to have it headed. But the fact of the matter is that it's exactly dead even right now what Kirby Smart has done with the Georgia program and what Mark Richt did in his first 3 years in the Georgia program. The key now in the playoff era is what Kirby does with it now. And, there's no question that Kirby has benefited from what Mark Richt built, whether it be literally in an indoor practice facility in a West End expansion, or it's more intangible in what they've done on the football field. So it's Kirby Smart's task now to take it that next step, and they can do that right here in beautiful New Orleans, where we sit here next to the Creole Queen. We ought to get on that thing when we're done here. The nightly jazz cruise out here on the Mississippi River. The key is going to be Kirby Smart gets on the paddle boat and takes it on up the river, right?
Right. And I think in some places I've been, Chip, I've seen a tendency when one coach leaves and the new coach comes in, there's a portion of the fan base that feels like you got to put down the last guy if you want to show support for the current guy.
Yeah.
And that's just not the way it works. And I think Kirby Smart sent the right message when he was one of the first ones to reach out and wish Mark Richt well. I mean, Kirby Smart coached running backs under Mark Richt in 2005. One of the years Georgia won the SEC title. I mean, Kirby owes Mark Richt a debt of gratitude, for hiring him in 2005, helping him advance his career, and recruiting guys like Roquan Smith and Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. Without those guys, Kirby's not playing for a national title last year. And this senior class, these are all Mark Richt guys. It all goes together. It's not one or the other. You can like Mark Richt and appreciate Mark Richt and still be the biggest Kirby Smart fan, and vice versa. You can be a huge Kirby Smart fan and still have an appreciation for what Mark did. And I think right now that's what I see with Georgia. I don't see the same sniping and negativity that I do overall in a lot of fan bases. I mean, there's a couple jerks in every fan base that'll say a few things and you kind of wince and go, boy, do you really want to represent your fan base that way? But for the most part, what I've sensed from Georgia, whether it was Mark Richt when he covered the team, dealing with David Pollack and how he represents Georgia, or Maria Roberts, I mean, this is a program that really is all pulling one end of the rope. And right now you see that with the way Kirby reached out to Mark today and really celebrated what was, I think, a Hall of Fame career. I don't know what others think about whether Mark belongs in the Hall of Fame or not, but I certainly think he's a Hall of Famer. He was the ACC Coach of the Year last season. This 3-game stretch that Miami's
Fired
had
the next season. That's amazing.
It's been the best 3 years Miami's had in a row in a long time. And
Yeah.
I read somewhere today that Mark Richt has produced more NFL draft picks than even Nick Saban since 2002. So this is a guy that's done a lot of good things, Chip. And I think you're right. I think he did leave a positive legacy at Georgia. Even though maybe it didn't end. But who does? I mean, who really does? Leave their school on their own terms without being forced out or fired? It just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, and the money and the stakes they're paying for nowadays, makes that a little bit more justifiable. But it's still hard. These guys are very competitive and want to succeed. And you bring up a great question. I'd love to hear from you guys out there about what you think, because with Mark Richt, his coaching career goes beyond whatever he did in 15 years at Georgia, 3 years in Miami. I mean, he coached 2 Heisman Trophy quarterbacks at Florida. They had their greatest stretch of success with
Won
him.
A couple national titles there.
With him as offensive coordinator. Does that count? Those guys, Matt Stafford will tell you to this day, I mean, Aaron Murray, those guys came to Georgia because he was the quarterback whisperer of his day, which is kind of ironic that, that they got such poor quarterback play at Miami once he went down there, but it just goes to show 2 things. I think how important it is to get, players, period. But I also think it speaks to the place, the platform that the University of Georgia is. I mean, right now, you think that Georgia, that Mark Richt could just go down and do the same thing at Miami he did at Georgia, but he couldn't. Now, whether that's because of where he was at this point in his career, maybe so, but that's his alma mater. He's a Boca Raton native. That's South Florida. That's some fertile recruiting ground. So I expected him to do a lot more with it than he did. I certainly didn't expect what we saw this season. I guess nobody did. They were
7-6,
a preseason top 10 team, and they finished 7-6. So I don't follow Miami close enough to know what all the idiosyncrasies were to their undoing, but that's certainly unacceptable. And I do think, though, despite the warning from the AD, I think Mark Richt just he did this of his own volition, and we wish him good luck going forward.
Yeah, I mean, he's 58 years old. He's a multimillionaire. At some point, you've got to consider your health, your quality of life, and what you've got for the game. And I've heard so many people say that when I don't have the passion for the game, that's when I know it'll be time to get out. And There's some question, whether or not Mark really had that same passion. And I saw a commenter on there. I couldn't really decipher if it was supposed to be a negative comment toward me because one of the programs I covered was Tennessee. But on that note, I can tell you when I covered the Vols and Philip Fulmer knocked Steve Spurrier out in 2001, that was a Florida team that was headed for a national title, and Tennessee went down to the Swamp as a 17-point underdog and beat Spurrier. That was his last game at the Swamp, and that was when Steve Spurrier said, you know what, if you win 10 games and it's not enough, I'm out. And that was essentially the knockout blow. And a lot of Tennessee fans felt like now it's Tennessee's time. Steve Spurrier's gone. But Georgia and Mark Richt put up a big roadblock, and with an assist from David Pollock and David Green. Tennessee thought that was going to be their time once Spurrier was gone. Those 2001 Vols were headed to the national title game before Nick Saban upset them. And back then, Nick Saban wasn't a known commodity.
Yeah.
He'd come from Michigan State where he'd had moderate success, but he hadn't won that national title yet. So Tennessee was really chomping at the bit, and Georgia became the hurdle. After all those years of not being able to beat Florida, the Vols finally knock off Florida, and now here comes Mark Richt in Georgia and David Green saying that he's not worried about how loud Neyland Stadium's going to be. And then going into Neyland and taking Tennessee down. And here comes David Pollock wreaking havoc on what was a very good Tennessee offense. Quite frankly, Tennessee's never been the same since then. Their fall off was very dramatic after Mark Richt in Georgia seized the East once Florida left. So that was a real pivotal time in SEC football history. And while Georgia wasn't able to finish the job, Chip, I dare say had there been a 14 playoff, maybe things would have been different. I know I covered the 2007 or 8 Sugar Bowl here when they played Hawaii. I was freelancing for the Honolulu Advertiser. And I saw that Georgia team absolutely tear Colt Brennan's head off. He went through the handshake line with the helmet still on. I think he was afraid he was going to get hit again. But that Georgia team was as good a football team as I'd seen that season. So you put the playoffs in play when Mark Richt was at Georgia, I think he might have won a national title.
Well, I think that's a good segue to back where we are now. We're here in New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl.
Not at the playoffs.
And not in the playoffs. Georgia playing in the Sugar Bowl. Unbelievable that, how much chatter there is about whether Georgia's disappointed to be here and all that. You and I have both been pretty clear. We don't think that's necessarily the case. But I do believe this is an important time in Kirby Smart's tenure and in Georgia's tenure. You did come up short. A lot of people, you didn't have to pound your own chest. There were plenty of people, Kirk Herbstreit on down, pounding their chest about Georgia. I think what we saw in the playoffs last night validated everything that we knew about Georgia, as probably should have been included as one of the 4 best teams. At the end of the day, whether the selection committee will admit it or not, that's not their true criteria, because if it was the 4 best teams, there wouldn't be any question that Georgia would have been included in it. The truth was they didn't want to let a 2-loss team come in that wasn't a conference champion, and so they got what they got, and it is what it is. But here's the key. The key is always what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? What's Georgia going to do now? They have a great argument to that end, but they have to take care of business on Tuesday night against a Texas team that, quite frankly, is disappointing how their season went too. They expected a lot more this year. They're expecting a lot with Tom Herman. You talk about a team that has motivation. For Tom Herman, in terms of program building, which he's trying to establish in a rich, talented state, they need to win this game, for something they can build on. Georgia, on the flip side, this is the first game of 2019. They're going to be a top 3, top 4 team out of the box next year, no question. Meanwhile, Florida goes in there and handles Michigan, pretty handily, and then suddenly you see, how quick I think the Northeast-oriented media is to jump on that Florida. And all you heard about after that, what was it, 45-10 win or 41-15, whatever it was, over Michigan. Look at that. Just
Dan
Mullen got him on the got him back into the national equation right away. So my point is, you got to keep your foot on the accelerator. You got to stay excellent. I think that's what Kirby Smart is all about. But a lot of that's going to be determined in the next 48 hours when we see what happens here in New Orleans at the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, perception becomes reality, and the reality of it is that what Georgia does in this game really doesn't reflect a whole lot on what they did in the regular season. And there's enough guys leaving that it really isn't a true indicator. But the perception is going to be, is the up arrow up on Georgia or is it down? And if they were to lose to Texas, Chip, I think it would be down. Now, how would that affect recruiting? How would that, not just this year's class, but the perception of kids down the line? It is a me now generation. I wrote that story today. Jim Chaney was available to the media. We hadn't talked to Jim.
Great stuff today, by the way. We've barely been able to get around to it. That was a good deep dive piece you did.
August 1st, I think Jim talked with the media and said, don't rule anything out with the quarterbacks. Well, boy, we sure couldn't, because we saw it all this year. And Jim said he felt like they did right. And I think what he meant by that is maybe the results didn't come out right, but the coaches gave an honest effort to win football games and try to use Justin Fields as good as they could while still doing what was best for the team and winning games. They didn't try to force him in. Now, you and I might have thought, well, maybe in the SEC title game they kind of set him up to be the hero a few times when Jake was having a great game.
They did.
I don't really believe that Justin Fields has any complaint. I think he played a lot for a guy that was playing behind Jake Fromm. Now, things have changed. You can go back and look at other quarterbacks. Again, I'll reflect on Tennessee just because I know Georgia fans love that so much. I know T. Martin had about 17 career passes behind Peyton Manning. Justin Fields got a lot more work than that. He was very prepared, considering the kind of year Jake had as the number 3 passer in the country, winning football game after football game, not missing a beat, showing great leadership after leading the team to the national title as a freshman. So I think that they did all they could for Justin. It's not anybody's fault, Chip. It's a simple situation where Georgia doesn't have the snaps that Justin Fields thinks he needs at this point in his career. Other quarterbacks may not push that hard. They might say, you know what, ultimately I want to get to the NFL. I like my teammates. I'm willing to wait my turn. That's not where Justin Fields is at right now. He wants to play right now. He is good enough to play right now in a lot of places.
Probably.
Just not at Georgia. So I think what Jim Chaney was saying today was, look, we went into this with this being a fluid situation. We did everything we could to maximize his talents, and therefore we did right by what we could do. Now, it may not work out. Justin may leave. This may be his last game. It probably will be his last game based on the players and what they were saying today. That doesn't mean it was a failed experiment. The fact is, Georgia had a great backup quarterback at the ready. Had he ever been needed, I think it would have been a better situation than probably 98% of their schools in America. As it turned out, I don't think quarterback play was the reason that Georgia's not playing in the college football playoff, Chip. I think it had more to do with DeAndre Walker getting injured at the start of the fourth quarter against Alabama.
And let's be clear, I mean, the message here, again, as we stand here, a couple of days away from kickoff in the Sugar Bowl, is Georgia's trying to keep Justin Fields. Now, is that the best thing for Georgia? Certainly Kirby Smart believes that based on everything they're doing. I mean, let's be clear about it. The reason that he's saying what he's saying, the narrative that they put out there, what Jim Chaney's saying, and the fact that he's still with the team and apparently still going to be employed in the
business
in
as
the
you
game
asked
plan.
him today.
Business as usual. So they're trying to get him to stay. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic if he stays another year. What happens next year? Is that a divisive force to a man? And listen, my intention was to write on this, and you can read about it tomorrow on Dog Nation, but was in the dynamic between Justin Fields and Jake Fromm. Now, we can't ever know exactly what that's like between those two guys. I mean, they're always going to tell you, what you want to hear. Basically, hey, great guy, good competition, everything like that. I don't think that's 100% accurate. But I do believe what players are saying, that it hasn't had a negative effect in the locker room. Now, there's no question. I see your comments here. I've seen them all year. It's been divisive among the fan base. You've got to admit that. Everybody has an opinion on this, and that's why everybody loves the quarterback controversy and loves to talk about it. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's harmed Georgia in any way. Right. They didn't play well against LSU. I don't know if Justin Fields playing more in that game would have changed that outcome. He played more, less the very next week against Florida, and Georgia turned it around. So, you can't necessarily say that. And Jake Fromm, as you alluded to, just talk some of the national guys who don't have, a bone to pick in this whole thing. Guys like Greg McElroy and Kirk Herbstreit and Mark Spears, and when they talk about what they see from Jake Fromm, it's not wishy-washy. I mean, that guy's playing at an elite level and potentially has outplayed 2 5-star recruits in back-to-back years. That's not small potatoes, fellas.
Yeah, no, it's not. And even DeAndre Swift said today it wasn't divisive in the least. The players have proven they can stay focused. They can handle this. I see fans get upset and say, oh, don't talk about it anymore. Guess what? When you turn the game on Tuesday, they're going to be talking about it. Mm-hmm. When you go to the press conferences, they're going to be talking about it. It is the poster child situation for this new phenomena of quarterback transfers. The Texas offensive coordinator talked about it the other day. We're going to see more of this, not less, and everybody is paying attention to how Georgia's handling this and what's going to happen. It's not the situation that unfolded at Alabama simply because Jalen Hurts was a junior. If he was a freshman, you can bet he would have transferred. We saw what happened at Clemson. One guy left mid-season. Yeah. So I felt like Kirby did a good job keeping them both engaged all season long. I don't think Jake let it affect his performance, which is kudos to Jake Fromm. When we asked him about it, he said he doesn't really talk to Justin about it. He said that doesn't come up. He's going to do what's best for him. Jake's going to focus and do what's best for the team and try and lead the team. DeAndre Swift said today, hey, I'm the biggest Justin Fields out there. I'm going to be cheering for him wherever he goes. I think the fan base should probably take that same approach. Justin Fields couldn't have gone anywhere in America, and he chose to stay home and go to Georgia, even though there was a quarterback there that had won an SEC title. I admire the fact that the guy wanted to come in and compete. He wasn't a distraction all year. I don't think his dad should have done an interview with ESPN in August, but I don't blame Justin Fields for that. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard one divisive word from Justin Fields. I know a microphone caught him saying something. He would have never said that had he been aware that a TV guy was running around with a microphone. So it's not like Justin Fields has been, in my opinion, Chip, I haven't seen anything or any behavior or caught wind of anything from any of the players that I've talked to that have said this guy's throwing a fit and causing a problem in the locker room. I didn't see that. Now, the competition between him and Jake, I'm sure it was icy. It wasn't a mentor, younger guy situation like it's going to be with Dwan Mathis. Yeah. It was, I'm coming here to take your job.
Yeah.
And everybody knew it. And it was game on. And you know what? At Georgia, it's like that at every position, Chip.
Yeah.
They got 5 stars everywhere. And I think everybody on the team recognized that. Game on, man. They got to compete for their job every day. We would ask them, well, what do you think about Fields? What do you think? They said, man, I'm just trying to win my job. And you look around, and sure enough, the depth, the quality depth on the offensive line, the quality depth in the second. I mean, Richard LeCounte didn't get 1 start. And Kirby can say whatever he wants about formation, but you better believe Richard LeCounte took note that he didn't start that football game, and he stepped on the gas. So this is just what it is at big-time football. There's going to be competition at every position, and now with this transfer portal, Chip, we're going to see more and more of this every year. There's 2 guys in the Georgia portal this year. Next year, I'd be willing to bet you dollars to donut, there'll be at least 6.
Yeah, there's 2 in the. No, we're not talking about it as much, and they're not as high-profile players, but there's 2 guys in the portal for Texas as they're down here this week. Tom Herman talked about that, and you know what he's doing? He's trying to get them to stay on the team as well. So, I mean, that's the world we live in now. And look, I don't begrudge it, really. When I think, you think about really, and I don't think it's intentional necessarily, but the system has taken advantage of student athletes in college football for a long, long time. This is a way when coaches can leave and take new contracts without,
sitting out a year,
without sitting a year or anything like that. I can see why players should be afforded the same possibility, and at quarterback especially, when you're playing at that latitude, altitude that Georgia expects Fields to, he doesn't want to sit behind Fromm for 3 years. But that's why, I was surprised when he came to Georgia first place. It was a heck of a recruiting coup for Kirby. Right now, it's a heck of a headache.
No doubt about it. And talking with the Texas players, they still think that Georgia's going to be a heck of a headache, even without DeAndre Baker. I was talking with the Texas quarterback, and another one of those stories, we move back a little bit. I mean, that Mark Richt thing today with his shockwaves, but the Texas quarterback, he said, boy, they lose DeAndre Baker. They got another first-round pick that's going to replace him. And I don't know that Tyson Campbell's played like a first-rounder yet, but he might end up
being one eventually.
He might end up being one. He was a 5-star coming in, and talking with Richard LeCount and talking with McCole Hardman, these are 2 guys that both told me Tyson Campbell has balled out. Also, I don't know if you saw it on our Dog Nation Facebook page, but earlier today I went live with DeAndre Swift. Something I don't we're not allowed to do that at Georgia, the live streaming stuff.
Streaming. Claude Felton's and no live streaming.
So I've tried to do some live streaming here. We did it with the Texas quarterback yesterday. We did it with Jake.
We're doing it now from the Creole Queen.
We're doing it now from the Creole Queen. We did it with DeAndre Swift, but before I could get the camera on, somebody asked him, what makes Jim Chaney mad? And he said McCole Hardman makes Jim Chaney mad because I guess McCole's always on the sideline talking when Jim's trying to get his attention.
McCole is now, I know this about him. McCole's, give me the ball. I'm open. I'm giving you the ball. Fromm lights up when you talk about that.
Yeah.
Because he comes to the side every day. I was open, man. Be looking for it. And the truth is, McCole Hardman, he can go house anytime, man. No question about that.
Well, and as fast as he is on the field, he's got some juice in his conversation. He's a real excitable, exciting guy.
He's still thinking about the NFL
He's
equation,
another
too.
guy still thinking about that. We'll get to that in a second, Chip. We'll go over that list of guys who could go pro. I have some in mind that might surprise you. But, this Georgia team, these guys have been having a lot of fun. One of the cool things about the bowl is there's more access, and I feel like you get a really good feel for the team. And all year long, I've felt like Georgia's had a lot of focus. I feel like they've been very professional in their interviews, but I've really been very impressed with the whole operation that Kirby has. I think everything is carefully done, and I don't want to say choreographed because I do think the guys have freedom to talk, a little bit more freedom than at Alabama maybe, but I've just been impressed with the focus. And here, I could really feel the energy. I've heard some people say, well, maybe Georgia's not excited to be here. I disagree. I think they're excited to be here. I think they're chomping at the bit to prove that they belonged in the playoff. You saw some of their comments on social media. Swift said, look, we weren't trying to be disrespectful to anyone. We just wanted to let people know we felt like we belonged in there. I think they made their point known, and now, Chip, they got to go out there and back it up. And I guess we'll move right on to that point. Who are some of the juniors that you think, if you were going to rank them, give me your top 3 most likely guys to go pro as juniors off this Georgia roster?
Well, I would say, based on my conversation with him, is maybe Nada would be the most serious. Just because he's just a smart guy. He's a cerebral guy, and he's thinking it through. And guys, look, it's not all about draft position and money. Isaac's talking about things about how much can your body take. This is you guys. The SEC is NFL junior. It's really rough on you, and you got only a limited time space to be able to play this game at the level these guys play it, and that certainly is exponential when you move up to the NFL. So, I don't think the good news, I guess, for Georgia, good news, bad news, I guess, is there's not anybody that's a surefire thing like Roquan Smith was last year.
Right.
Roquan Smith, you can't turn your back on the top 10 NFL draft position. There's nobody in that position now. I saw a couple of people over here a while ago say, please, I don't want to see McCole Hardman go. He's one of those guys, he's got some value on the NFL level because he's blazing fast. And he's a multiple position player in that he's going to play special teams as a kick returner in addition to whatever he does on offense. And heck, you never know in the NFL. He may flip him back over there and make a cornerback out of him again. So, but I would say those are your two most likely. It's really weirdly quiet on the Riley Ridley situation.
Wasn't made available to the media
No,
either.
we haven't seen him at all. And he's a frontline player, leading receiver. We haven't seen him. So I kind of wonder about that scene. And look, guys, it's not always draft position money. You never know. We don't have access to these guys' academic records or how bad are they struggling in their, sports management major or what have you. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Some people are just tired of college and they want to go do something else. They can come back and finish college some other time. Or they've already graduated, and so now I've got my degree, done the college thing. I want to check that and see what I can do on the professional level. So I think that's all that is part and parcel of what Georgia players are dealing with. But there's no automatics in this whole group, and clearly Kirby has asked them to keep it to themselves if they've made a decision until after the bowl. And I imagine they have until the 14th of January. I'd imagine in the week after the bowl game's over, we'll hear from everybody.
You mentioned McCole Hardman. Who did he project? Maybe Tyreek Hill. You see what he's doing, or Gabriel with the Bears.
Right.
Those small speed guys have become a thing now that the offenses have started to spread out. And they get a little more open field. Now, I don't know that McColl's going to test out that way. Personally, I think he needs another year. I think he can improve his route running and his pass catching and enhance himself physically. I think J.R. Reed is a guy. You mentioned Isaac Naught. I would agree with that.
There's a guy who's graduated.
I think J.R. Reed's a guy that's
NFL.
And here's one for you. Here's a guy who's graduated. How about Rodrigo Blankenship? What does Rodrigo have left to do at the college level? Is he really going to be any higher of a draft pick next year than he is this year?
They generally don't get drafted. I mean,
right.
a lot of kickers don't get drafted. You're trying to fit in somewhere, and hey, if you can fit in and sign a free agent deal, that may be all you need to get your foot in the door.
And here's the thing: we're not trying to talk anybody into leaving. These guys have their own counsel, their parents, their agents, but they've got to do what's best for them. Now, there is plenty of incentive for them to come back. As we talked about, Georgia's going to start next season ranked in the top 3. They're going to be a national championship contender. There's plenty to come back to in college. But you come back in college, as you said, Chip. If you haven't graduated, you've still got to be a student athlete, go to all those classes, all those responsibilities, and there is the risk of injury. Now, there are insurance policies out there, but as you said, some guys, look, they're not in it for school.
No.
School's a part of the deal. It's a part of the package. Not all of them are that way. There's some, I'm sure, that enjoy going to class and sitting through other classes. But some guys come to Georgia to advance and go to the NFL. And a guy like Isaac Nauta, I mean, here's the thing with Isaac. I think he's undersized to be a blocking tight end, and I don't think he's fast enough to create matchups in the slot. That said,
I definitely think he should stay. But
is he going to get any faster or any bigger in the next year?
No.
Probably not.
No.
And I don't know. And the main thing is, I don't know what the tight end crop looks like this year compared to next year. He could be the same guy in 2 years and be the number 5 tight end this year and the number 13 tight end next year, depending on what the other class of tight ends are. So those are things that are outside of Georgia that affect these players' business decisions. Maybe this year he's only a 3rd round pick and you go, well, he should have stayed. Well, the news is maybe next year he'd be a 5th round because it's such a deep tight end class.
I think I saw him. He was 28th or 29th on the WalterCamp.com.
Among tight ends.
At that position, yes, that's pretty low.
That's very low.
That's
6 or
5 to
7
at best. So, but those things aren't totally accurate. And there's only a few of them who project underclassmen. So, but they rank by position, and that's generally where most of Georgia's players are, is in the 20 down range, and you want to get in the top 10 at your position, period, for the draft to make a difference. I mean, the draft is where you make your money. If you get a guaranteed contract out of the box for 3 to 4 years, then you're probably looking at the NFL pension and all that kind of stuff. So that's ultimately what you want, but it's not ultimately what they decide on.
Yeah, the guys I've seen projected in the first 3 rounds, DeAndre Baker, middle to late 1st round, and DeAndre Walker I saw as a 2nd round pick. Now, DeAndre Walker and Jonathan Ledbetter. I like him a lot. He's really come on. Walker, Jonathan Ledbetter, Nick Moore, they're all going to be down at the Senior Bowl. The long snapper, Nick Moore. that'll be a big event for Ledbetter. This game will be a big event for Ledbetter. Ledbetter trying to climb that chart. I thought he had a great SEC championship game. These are all seniors, and so they have a chance to enhance their stock. These juniors, again, Chip, no guarantee they get invited to the combine. Yes, they'll have a pro day. And the thing that they've said about it, when we ask them, well, where's Kirby at on this? Kirby doesn't try and talk any of them into staying. He just encourages these guys, get as much information as you can. They're going to talk to the experts. Obviously we're going to report what happens afterward. We're not proactive saying this guy should or this guy shouldn't. But based on what we've seen, there's really nobody, as you said, in terms of underclassmen that fits those first 2-round projection where you'd go, oh yeah, he needs to go like Roquan Smith did. So it'll be interesting. It's one of those things we'll keep an eye on in the off season, and certainly we'll take an eye, maybe talk to some guys after the game. I mean, J.R. Reed, a guy I brought up because he's graduated, got great counsel. His father was a former NFL player. I mean, these guys have a really good idea where they're going to go and understand the situation. I don't think you're going to see any naivety from any of these Georgia football players in terms of their future. And again, a lot to come back for, Chip, if they want to win a national championship, because I think this team next year will be in the college football playoff.
I don't think there's any question about that. And ultimately, I think it's probably a good note to wrap up on it. The fact that that's what Georgia is playing for. That's the vibe that I'm coming away from. Is they're looking at this as the first game of 2019, and they're looking at this as validation of everything that we all saw last night. Now, a lot of kudos to Oklahoma for kind of making a comeback after getting down 28-0.
How much of that was Alabama changing their defense up with a 28-0 lead?
It's hard to tell, but that, obviously, when you got double-digit favorites in the 2 semifinal games, you don't necessarily have the 4 best players, or maybe college football is just not that deep. I'm an 8-man proponent, but that's another podcast for another day. Yeah. So, anyway, we've got a lot more coming to you because we got a lot pushed back today because of the Mark Richt news, and then tomorrow is New Year's Eve. There's a lot going on here in the city. If you're still contemplating whether to come to the Sugar Bowl, tickets are available right now. Texas fans are out drawing Georgia maybe 2-1. That's what the narrative is. I noticed a lot of Georgia people getting in here late. A lot of them coming in today and tomorrow. So there's still time to come out here. Please join us. It's beautiful. It's 67 degrees. It's been a little wet, but the weather's been fantastic otherwise. Looks like the rains have cleared out, and looks like there's going to be a lot of fun to be had out in the quarter.
Yeah, and as for our forecast for the game, Chip, I'll just tell people that right now it's a little foggy.
Yeah, it is.
A little foggy. No, that's pretty corny. But anyway, we're going to do it. I hope everyone has a great Saturday night. Is that what night it is? I lose track of the days.
Oh, gosh, it's Sunday. Man.
Sunday night. Okay, tomorrow morning, Kirby Smart and Tom Herman press conferences. We'll have some stories from there, and then it'll be time to kick it off. Well, Brandon Adams, I think he's going to be doing something on this channel a little later. You're going to want to catch BA, and maybe one of us can make a cameo there with BA. Maybe we'll try and get him down here to this location. This is a pretty nice. This is a pretty scenic spot, if I don't mind saying so, Chip.
Yeah, bring him back down here.
All right, everyone, have a great Sunday night.
See y'all.